Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On to the approval of the agenda. Any comments, questions, modifications?
One modification, please. We're going to remove number 5 under proposed consent agenda, letter H, the leave of absence request.
Yeah.
It has been pulled at that person's request, and we'll revisit it if we need to at a later meeting.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Nope.
We'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda as amended.
Motion to approve the agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on to delegations, Mr. Peterson.
I had a delegation request, but it looks like the person was unable to make it. It was up in the air. So I'm going to try and reschedule that one. So I don't want to give the surprise away. So as of right now, no, I have no delegations.
Move on to the proposed consent agenda. Any comments or questions here?
I propose to approve the proposed consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, move on to public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Step on
Okay,
up.
come on up. I will give my little spiel here while we walk up. The board welcomes input from the community. Please follow the public comment procedure by stating your name at the podium and recognized by the chair. Each person is allowed 3 minutes to speak. You'll hear a little chime over to the side. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the board is not allowed to discuss items not on the agenda. The board will direct the superintendent to follow up on any items that arise during public comment as appropriate. The board will not allow complaints against any individual staff member or student in open session unless that individual has requested an open public hearing. In other words, no student or employee names, please.
Good evening, Dan Adamson. I just want to take a few minutes. Obviously, lots to do on a federal level with Department of Education, and you know they're going to abolish that and the pros and the cons and the yada yada yada. Right. I've got a couple, just 2 takeaways from that. You know, all that information was honestly, one was how dismal the proficiency level of our students nationally on a national average, how poor that is. And 2, the opportunity it gives the school district. This would be a grand time for us on a local level to toot our own horn and maybe make public our test scores and advocate for the staff, the great staff that we have and the job that they're doing for our kids. Obviously, it's no surprise we're levy failure, looking to run it again, looking down the barrel of possibly a double failure. You know, that would make it extremely tough for the school to operate on day to day. And not only that, bonds. I mean, we're 20 years behind it. The school district's 20 years behind. I mean, we have soccer, no soccer field, track's a mess, baseball needs redone, high school softball, the girls need a facility, we need middle school, we need facilities. The biggest thing is facilities, parent drop off and parking. It would be a great time to get that information out, and especially as property taxes go up and advocate, hey, this is where your dollars are going, this is the national average of what test scores are, and this is where we're at, and this is what we're striving to achieve for each and every child that attends school in the school district. So just my general consensus on that. So hopefully we take advantage of the opportunity. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? We have any electronic? That will move on to new business. Starting with the budget reduction update, Mr. Peterson.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to just give the board a brief rundown of the work that we're doing at the district level, as well as some preliminary numbers about what we're coming up with, and then get a little bit of guidance from the board and some suggestions as we move into our next phase. So, the district staff sat down last week on Friday and spent a significant amount of time going down specific line by line areas that we could eliminate or at least move back upon in an effort to come up with, my bottom line, and I know the board is aware of this, is about $1.5 million, $1.5 million that we stand to not collect in the first year were we to do a double failure. And so we, of course, because we cannot do any adjustments to our budget right after the vote, we need to prepare a worst case scenario prior to that. So we are still going to be collecting about $1 million from our current levy through the end of December of this year. So that leaves about $1.5 million to make up, to make sure that the district does not get into a position, quite frankly, of insolvency. Because if we were forced to try and come up with $1.5 million, we don't have the reserve to even touch that. So with Mona's help, we have preliminarily identified about $850,000 in initial cuts. And at this point in time, we have not addressed some of the elephants in the room as far as that is still inclusive of both high school and middle school sports in their current format. So that means no discussion yet of impact to athletics other than transportation costs for athletics. That would be eliminated. But the actual sports themselves would not at this point. And I don't mind saying, I did not believe that we would get to $850,000 without impacting some things that were, quite frankly, at the top of some people's lists. And we're there, which is a good thing. And it's also going to force us then to reprioritize for our next steps. Inclusive of that, and I've shared this with some of our staff members. Inclusive of that is a complete freeze on all district director and higher salaries. So that would be me and any other district director, as well as implementation of 5 furlough days for those same folks. And for those of you who aren't fully aware of what furlough days means, that means those are simply unpaid days that would no longer be paid. So everyone at the central office administrative level would be taking a 5-day pay cut. So that is inclusive of that number. I had preliminary discussions today with our principal staff about the same potential for all administration across the board. So when you take a look at the numbers that we're currently looking at, as well as when we are considering our reduction language in our collective bargaining agreement, specifically with KBEA, there are certain things we have to do in advance of notification of reduction in force. So we're in the process right now of moving some folks around for open positions that we currently have, and then working with building principals about whether or not some open positions will simply fold and not be included for the next school year. But as of right now, even at $850,000 worth of preliminary cuts, we're not talking specific staff members yet at any level. So Dan, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I see that I have listed here. What is the layout that other districts, who obviously we're not the only ones doing this kind of a push are going to? What are they doing? The same approaches?
I would say many of the same approaches. Our nearest neighbor is Richland School District. And right now they're sitting at 0.5% in reserve. And so they have an even bigger hill to climb. And if you've read the Tri-City Herald around what Richland is doing, they're actually demoting all of their assistant superintendents to executive directors. They're moving all of their executive directors, demoting them to directors. So you're seeing a significant amount of salary cuts within the central offices of some of the other big districts. Now, that being said, we've already made cuts to our central office and our building level administration just a couple of years ago, and those have not been replaced or rehired at this point. So there's still some work to do along those lines, but at least right now, we're projecting roughly $100,000 in cost savings due to administrative salary reductions, if everything works out the way that we have planned. So that's significant because the people that are doing this work need to be some of the people feeling the pinch as well, quite frankly. So we go from there to unfilled positions to then the movement and transfer of some people into open positions that they may be qualified for. And then at that point, realistically, the only positions that we really have out there are specialized positions. So there are a couple that we don't even have people who are qualified to teach them at this point. So we're going to have to go out and find people with the right certifications, with the right endorsements to be able to fill some of these spots. All that being said, my intent is to impact the fewest number of people who are currently employed as possible through attrition. And it's March, and I have yet to be in a school year, either in Benton City or any other place, where we haven't had a surprise or two occur April, May, June, July, where people they have a spouse who gets a new job, they realize they can retire now with more money than they thought they had. All those types of things happen. So I don't think we're done yet seeing the attrition moves, but we have to make some plans because ideally we're going to notify folks by April 15th if possible, but we have a drop dead date of May 7th by contract that we have to notify folks if they're not going to be renewed due to a reduction. So like I said, the next step really is taking a look at those specific positions, getting them filled as quickly as possible, and then kind of having a shuffle happen and then moving forward. So I'm actually it's no fun, but at the same time, I'm in a much better place than I was when thinking about the prospects of how many people we might have to lose versus potentially how many we actually will. As you go down the list from attrition via retirement, via resignation, via move, and all those types of things, once you get everybody kind of shuffling through and transferred, I think the number will end up being far less than I would have anticipated a month ago. And that's a very good thing.
I appreciate all the work that's gone into that, especially Mona. I know it's a lot of work pouring into these different areas. So what are the next steps as far as dates for the board to review figures and
well, we will continue to have this update until we're done, quite frankly.
Okay.
However, what I would like to propose, and have just get any discussion from board members, I would prefer, in the interest of just overall cost savings, to minimize summer school opportunities as much as possible. Because even though some of those funds, some of those opportunities are paid for with grants, some of those grants are going to be reimbursed through federal sources. And
Can we count on that?
I just want to be a little careful expending a bunch of federal dollars and then being, quite frankly, stuck with the bill. My recommendation to the board, and you don't need to take action on it, is discussion, as I've said, but would be to minimize summer school to absolute barest necessities, not to open it up to just any student who wants to be there, but truly address the needs of only students who we feel have to be there, or students who need specific classes for graduation at the high school level. So what that would mean would be we'd run a fairly standard credit retrieval program for upperclassmen, juniors and seniors only at the high school level. And then probably look at some of our biggest challenges and opportunities for kids to grow or make growth at the elementary level. Who are having significant issues with either reading or math. I think a much more focused approach, even though I have been the person at the top of the hill screaming summer school should be for everybody, I think in this current financial time, we should probably limit it to the kids who need to be there, not just who want to be there. And the issues that seem to be coming out of the federal government right now, regardless of anyone's political bent, it doesn't matter. There's simply there's too much up in the air from our federal system, in my opinion, to make too many expenditures that we're unwilling to eat if we had to.
And I don't expect you to have these numbers offhand, but be interested in seeing the general summer school costs versus what a trimmed down version.
Absolutely. I can have that for you on the 15th.
I have a question. If I were a student up there, or actually their parent, how would I know, what steps do we take to notify them that their student is in peril of not graduating and or having a problem and should think about summer school or anything?
Well, we're in a very fortunate time of the year in that, from an elementary standpoint and high school standpoint. I'll address elementary first. We have conferences, spring conferences coming up Thursday and Friday this week across the board, K-12. So I've already been in contact with some folks at our elementary to say, we know that spring conferences are not required for every student, but we try and get our kids who are most at risk in to give them some progress. And this is usually the time that we start talking summer school. So that can happen Thursday and Friday for our elementary. Our high school and the at risk of not graduating, I will go out on a limb and tell you that our counselors historically have done an outstanding job from the start of second semester in January of notifying kids of what the classes are that they need to graduate. I know that there might be a hiccup here or there, but in general, our counselors have attempted to make contacts with parents already. The other great thing about summer school from a high school standpoint is for those seniors, even if graduation is in question, as long as they complete a course or even two courses during the summer, they count as an on-time graduation. Summer is actually an extension of the fourth quarter for high school. So there's not a danger of them not receiving their diploma or not being able to go on to, whether it's post-high school schooling, whether it's CBC, WCU Tri-Cities, or an internship or even a job, they would still be able to do that regardless of the outcome. So I have very good faith, though, that our administrative staff and counseling staff have gotten a good look at most, if not all, of the kids who are in any danger of not graduating.
Any other comments or questions on budget reduction? We'll move on to 7B, proposed 3 director district map. Peterson.
Yes, so the board received an electronic copy, and I apologize, I did not print out the 9 pages to hand out to the board, but the discussion really is more around next steps. So what we had is at the board's request, we talked to a gentleman named Bob over at Sammamish Data Services. Sammamish is the state guru, for lack of a better term, the districts go to when they're discussing their own boundaries. Now, if you remember back at the last census, following the 2020 census, we had to make some boundary adjustments. That was also done by Sammamish Data Services. And so we asked these folks to come back in. We sent them all of your addresses and then asked them to come up with equitable in number of districts if we were to reduce from 5 director districts to 3 director districts. And that's the information that was sent to you, various maps along with a breakdown of what the boundaries would be for each of those and the number of people within each of those. And they came out, I got to admit, very, very nicely. And so when you look at the maps themselves and the numbers associated with them, going from 5 director districts down to 3, they list an ideal population of 3,074 residents for each of those 3 areas. And they came out pretty darn close in that the total population of 3,022, 3,105, and 3,095. So those are all within 50, 52, I think is the biggest variable in there. And when you look at the population itself and the breakdown by ethnicity, they also came out fairly even, because that's, of course, one of the things that does need to be considered. In fact, several school districts locally, Pasco being the most recent, had to redraw their boundaries simply based on ethnic populations within their director districts. So with this scenario, we have 3 very doable director districts by population and ethnicity, which, quite frankly, for a first attempt at this, I was very impressed. The cost was almost insignificant from my standpoint. I think it cost us $1,200, $1,300 for this to be done. I was quite frankly, and I think I even told the board, anticipating adding another 0 to that. But that's only during the census required ones, evidently. Probably has something to do with federal money, I wouldn't doubt, but we'll leave that one alone. But the bottom line is that at this point, our next step would be for me to submit these maps first to our attorney for review. They go through at a finer level with regards to the population breakdowns and making sure that we're not in any potential hot water there. And then they would draft the proper resolutions and such. And we turn around and we go to the county auditor and present them with the proposed maps, with the resolutions. This, quite frankly, was moving a little bit. They got back to us much quicker than I anticipated. If it was possible, I mean, it is conceivable we could put something on the ballot in November. which would be, in my opinion, we either go this November or the following November from a cost standpoint. And of course, even if this is voted and voted in, it doesn't take effect immediately. It takes place the next time that there's an election cycle for either an individual board member or board members. So there would still be, I guess the easiest way to put it was you're not going to get out of it that easy or that quick. For anybody who's looking to potentially go into an at-large position or when those districts stay the same until the next election. So realistically, I'm simply looking for permission to go ahead and take those next steps and see where that gets us. And then at some point, bring those recommendations from the elections office and from our attorney to the board for a formal discussion and either approval or not approval.
Do you have any estimate on the fees for the legal services that might be looking at? Is it going to be relatively insignificant?
Yeah, it's not going to be as insignificant as the map was. I'll tell you that much. I would not foresee it. If it took them 20 hours of time, that would put us roughly in the $5,000 range. I would be shocked if I would be surprised if it was more than that. But I will also get a quote from Paul Clay and Associates prior to actually pressing the button, and I can let the board know what an approximate cost will be.
That'd be great.
Just out of curiosity, and I realize there's nobody living over there, but when and if 250 people move in over there, did we take that into consideration at all when we redrew the map? Or, I mean, did we split that in half? Is it all in one group? I guess it doesn't matter, but.
No, Bob basically said that he has to only take into account the current residents in the current areas. Because if you start making assumptions,
Sure.
You could really get out of whack. And while we've seen the first two model homes go up, until there's people living there and we truly see an impact, it would not be time to discuss then altering those boundaries. And I think, in the one across the street, we're talking about 5 different phases for a total of 209 homes. The last time I heard from the city, we were looking at 4 different phases of the big proposal up on the I-82 sub area. So it's not going to be instant where all 900 houses are up at once and we have to deal with them. It'll give us some time.
I know there's about 8 smaller divisions that are also being proposed, and those are you see them around in matter of fact, you go down the OIE there, you can look off to the side
Yep.
and see 2 of them. But those are probably gonna be a few more. Now, that isn't going to be projected to be the same type of house that you're going to get there.
Mhm.
But it'll still have population of 3 houses per spot that are going to come.
Well, I still feel this is a likely path for the future of our district and makes sense, especially given we're still an empty chair down there, so.
Yep.
Any other comments or concerns about?
I guess my biggest concern would be financially, here we are talking about cutting transportation to sporting events. I mean, yes, I agree. Nobody wants to sit here. So maybe if we make this change, that'll improve that. I'm not hedging my bets there at all, but we
Yeah.
gotta do something, but I would like it to be as effective as it can be.
And I can certainly, while Amanda at the elections office won't go so far as to give me a bottom dollar price for an election, I can get you a good estimate based on past elections off presidential year or on presidential year. the average of how many other municipalities are going out, as well as how many initiatives and other things might be on the ballot, because the more that there are on the ballot, obviously, the less our chunk of that is.
And then, weird question, but can the county tell us no? I mean, is that their prerogative? Can they say, this looks like a great idea, but no?
No, they really can't. What they can do is make sure that we have followed the correct process. They can ensure that, they'll double check the maps just as much as we do. And just as much as our attorneys do. That being said, they rely on some Amish data for some of the same type of work that we're asking for. As long as we have a legally approved resolution, we have a vote of the board to put it forward for an election. And it's simply a matter of putting it on the ballot and paying the bill when it comes due. Yes, sir.
Just one on this, on these developments going across the street, down the road, and several others. Is there any responsibility within the county to check with effective school districts or anything about what is potentially going to happen? Because as you're kind of seeing these spots, yeah, it's one thing for me to say, well, there's 2.5 acres, 3 acres down, but they're going to make 3 houses, big deal. But one that's up by Kybee Market, also one that's at the end of the road there, and there's going to be another one of that size. That does have an effect, in what we can support and do.
Mhm.
Because if that came to pass in 3 to 5 years, or at least closer, that would have a real significant effect on Kybee schools.
Correct. I think the main thing that we could do in that regard, the barn doors are open on the one across the street right now, next to the market. And quite frankly, the 209 houses in the 4 years it's probably going to take to see them all isn't going to be as big a deal. However, for the larger one that we have a good idea is in the works, and the second potential, if the board would like me to explore potential for impact fees, would have to be something that we would make a request to the city of Benton City for, have the city council approve it. As you know, Benton City and virtually any municipality has impact fees for builders right now to account for emergency services, to account for water and sewer and those types of contingencies. It is not unheard of, though, for school districts to ask to be also included in that with an amount that, once collected from the whole, would suffice to help with maintenance, upkeep. Certainly, I don't believe we would be able to get enough to get a new school. But when you look at a community like Pasco, impact fees alone have paid for a couple of schools in their area. But thank goodness we don't have that type of growth. But certainly when we're talking about maintenance and upkeep of facilities, I think that's more than a fair discussion to have.
Well, certainly affect, right next to my place, there's probably 20 acres, which is now available for building. And that isn't the major ones, but there's going to be, that will have some impact on the school district.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow if we can get involved as possible in understanding what funding we may be available or available to the district, that would be very helpful.
Okay. I will make some phone calls and get, luckily with the Tri-Cities amount of growth that has happened there, we've got some regional experts in impact fees and how to go about it. So I can get in contact with them and then give the board a report.
Thank you.
Yep.
That suffice for the approval we needed.
Absolutely.
And moving on to item 8, board comments.
No comment.
All right, we'll move on to item 9, superintendent's report.
So just very quickly, couple of items. Attended the Wausau Small Schools Conference last week, very up in Wenatchee, great conference. To say that there are about 180 other districts all in the same boat we are is an understatement. If you're a small district, meaning probably 2,000 or less in the state, you're having some hard conversations. So, it's a difficult time to be in public ed financing, I can tell you that. But a great conference. And I did want to make a note if I haven't officially told you, because it is important in my worldview to let the board know that I am paying for my own travel and registration for WASA conferences since the levy failure. So my trip to Wenatchee and any future superintendent professional development will be paid by me and not by the district. So I just wanted to put that out there for you all to know, especially when we're talking about, transportation cuts and potential staffing cuts. The final thing I have is that I wrote a letter of support to the city of Benton City last week and delivered it. And they're asking for a $50,000 grant that's going to go towards a park down by the railroad bridge. And if you know that they're trying to make a walking path across the river, they're purchasing or have purchased 11 acres, going to create a park there. And they're going forward with some grants to try and fund some of the amenities. And I wrote a letter on behalf of the district to support that effort. We'll increase our kids and staff's access to walking trails, hiking opportunities, things like that. It's simply there's a way to get more parks into our city. That's a great thing. So they received that. I'm hoping that they will have an answer for us as to whether or not the grant was received later this summer. I don't think it's going to stop the city from doing anything if they don't happen to get that grant, but it was very nice to see the city reach out and ask for our support in doing that. I think it's a sign of a positive relationship with the city and city council right now. So
Yeah. Who's that grant for?
I think it's for T-Mobile. I think the name of it is Hometown Opportunities. I'd actually heard of the grant before. And some small communities in the state have received it in the past. I've seen a couple of I know that one city paid for paid for some playground equipment with it last year. But I think it's a great opportunity. I'm glad that the city is thinking about things like that, because as you know, if we're building houses, we need places for recreation and places for kids to go be kids.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that update.
Yep.
All right, with that, we'll move into executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, section 1G, performance of a public employee for 30 minutes with no business to follow. So we will be adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks for coming.